Good morning, everybody. It's Monday morning, and we are beginning a new series in our devotions today. For want of a better word, I've just called it metaphors. And a metaphor is just like a play on words where we make statements and we use words. Sometimes Jesus did them. We all use them from time to time. That the normal using of that word is put aside and it takes on a completely new angle, but using that same word. We're talking about this week, Jesus, the light of the world. That's a good metaphor, I guess. And it comes from the book of John, chapter 8, verse 12. In fact, there's a number of references in Scripture to Jesus being the light of the world. But this is going to be our main focus today, where Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And he was saying that those who follow him will never walk in darkness, and they themselves will be the light of life. I want to concentrate on this factor today. Now, Jesus said he was the light of the world. But in John chapter 1, where it talks about Jesus being the light of the world, it says this, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness does not understand it. There's something about light that darkness doesn't understand, but I think there's something about darkness that we need to understand. So for a couple of days, forgive me, but I'm going to be taking you into the realm of darkness so that we get to understand the light as Jesus is shining into that particular darkness. The first aspect of darkness I want to look at today is the darkness that comes from illegitimate desire. This is the beginning of darkness. It goes back to Genesis chapter 3 and verse 6, where it says that when the woman saw the fruit was pleasing to the eye, she desired it and she took it. As a result of her responding to that illegitimate desire for something that pleased the eye, we begin the journey into a very, very dark place. And in Genesis 3 verse 6, where it says the woman took that because she desired it, it's this illegitimate or illicit desire that begins our journey into this place of darkness. It all begins with an illegitimate desire. God was in the Garden of Eden, and he thought that he was enough. But Eve had other ideas, and when Satan came along and said, are you sure that God is not hiding something from you? Are you sure that God hasn't got something else for you? That sort of tainted her thinking to think, is God really enough? Or it could be that maybe I could have God, but maybe there's something else. And Satan said, indeed there is. If you eat of this fruit, you will have the knowledge of good and evil. And she said, man, that's what I want. I want God, but I also want the knowledge of good and evil. It looked desirous to her, and she fell for it. It was an illegitimate and an illicit desire. God is always enough, people. From the Garden of Eden onwards, he has always been enough. And when we think if we can have God and something else in addition to God, whether even if it's a good thing, it's an illegitimate or an illicit desire. I remember as a kid, I grew up in a mining town, and it was nickel mining, but there was a lot of iron pyrites in the rocks. And friends and I used to go down to a place called the Cutting, which was a big cut in the rock, and in this were streaks of gold. And man, we thought we're going to be so wealthy. And so we got our little hammers and we hammered out all this little pieces of rock with this gold in it. And it just looked so tempting. It looked so right. It looked so perfect. We thought we had struck it rich. Only to go home with our find to find that all we had was fool's gold. Now that's a good word. Fool's gold. You see, not everything that shines or looks like gold is actually gold. It could just be fool's gold. It's kind of like this illicit desire that we think we need something more than God. It's like a mirage in a desert where we look at it from a distance, we're dying of thirst, and we see this mirage and it looks so promising. It looks like it's got something to offer, only to find when we get there that it was just a mirage. It promised so much, but delivered absolutely nothing. People get serious about this. There are so many illicit desires around us today. Some of them are terribly bad, and some of them might even appear to be good. And yet we have to be so discerning to say, is this thing going to replace God, or is this thing going to add to something that I already have in God? For both those reasons, they're illegitimate. Remember in the book of Joshua, we have a guy by the name of Achan, and he was in the battle where the walls came down and he was instructed, don't take anything, but he couldn't help himself. And he looked at this as the first city and he thought, man, just in case there's not another city, I can't trust God enough to believe that there might be more. I'm going to take it. So he took some robes, he took some gold, he took some silver, and it was just lying there. And he thought, this just is too good to be true. And so he took of that, only to find out by God's revelation that God saw him. And God told on him to Joshua and says, there's sin in the camp. And it was the sin of illegitimate and illicit desire. And it led to a horrible end to the story of Achan and his family. Let me say this, people. If things are too good to be true, it's probably because they are. So let's check out our lives. Let's make sure that there is just God in our lives, that any form of illegitimate or illicit desire is recognized, confessed, and dealt with. That'll be a beginning of us understanding where darkness comes from. Think about that today. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.